welcome to our channel where we share Sasquatch evidence and first-hand encounters, and sometimes we even share stories from fellow researchers. I'm very excited about this one today. We are going to be speaking with a man named John Pickering. He is a researcher in Washington State, and he's just a great guy with some good stories and some good theories. Here he is to share his Sasquatch encounters.
Well, my name is John Pickering. I'm an amateur Sasquatch researcher from Western Washington. I was born and raised in the Olympic Peninsula, out in Grace Harbor. Lived here all my life and really never wanted to go anywhere else. From kind of an early age, my family, whenever their families would go on vacation, maybe go to Disneyland or go visit someplace, we went camping. Everything was always around something out in the woods, out in the nature, whether it was fishing or hiking or just out exploring. That was what we considered fun and recreation. And as I spent time from a very early age out in the woods, I got really interested in everything, nature-wise. But I was always kind of told that there was no such thing as a Sasquatch. That was just lore and fictitious thing. But I always had kind of a little interest in the back of my brain. I always kind of thought, I don't know. Something just told me there was something about it that was real. So as time went on, travels and exploring, I was about 15 years old, and I wanted to go to some lakes that my father had talked about. Him and his old hunting partner had went to 30 years prior to that, and we went to these lakes. I got a friend, he was going to go with me, and my dad was going to drop us off. And so we hiked into these lakes, and we got up there, and it was July, but there was still a little bit of snow on the ground, and it was all real neat. High kind of lake, mountain lake. But my friend, he kept saying that something was watching us across the lake. I didn't see anything, but he kept swearing that there was something over there watching us. We kind of, for lack of better words, the atmosphere was just kind of weird. We felt just weird. So we decided, you know what? We were supposed to spend the night at the lake, and we decided, nope, we're out of here. We just got nervous. And we hightailed back out of the lake, had to go climb down a pretty long, steep ridge. And we get to a little spur road, and we start walking down that spur road, and it got dark. And there was no moon that night. It was a starry night, but there was no moon, so it was very dark. And as we're walking down the road, it was just enough light to make out where the road was. It was pretty good, probably about 40-year-old second growth timber along both sides of the road at that point. So it was fair-sized timber, but not real big. And it was just a wall of black. And as we're walking along, my friend's like, kept asking me if I heard that. And at the time I hadn't. And then all of a sudden I heard a pretty good crunch in the brush to my left. My friend was to my right. And I made the comment, well, it's probably just a deer or something. I'll yell at it and scare it away, and would continue walking. So I let out this yell, and we start walking, and whatever it was, it started walking. And very, very distinctive crunch, 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 like bipedal type steps. And at first, I kept telling myself, oh no, I'm hearing my friend's footsteps, even though it was on the other side of me. So I said, stop. And we both stopped, and whatever it was took a couple steps and stops. And well, we're 15 years old. We're getting pretty spooked. But so we continue walking. When we start walking, it starts walking. And this went on about 2 miles down the road until the river comes up alongside the road, and went under a bridge, built a fire, and spent the night. So that kind of set the stage a little bit for me wondering what the heck was that followed us down that road. But at the time, I still like, oh, deer, bear, cougar, I didn't know. So years later, I'm 22 years old now. A friend of mine and I decide we're going to take vacation at the same time, and we're gonna hike somewhere, do some fishing. He wanted to do some fishing. And we debated where to go, and the same location came up. And we decided, okay, we'll go there. That's good fishing. But we had to set our vacation at work, where we worked, like in December, to go. So we weren't going to be going until July. So we had a lot of time to talk about it. And during that time, I was being trained with an old gentleman on another job. And we were talking about hiking and fishing and camping and stuff, and the same location's name came up. And that's like, yeah, I had been there once, and everything. And he said, well, he said, something really strange happened there one time. What's that? He says, well, I was there with my son, and my son was about 12 or 13 at the time. And we were camping in one of the old Army pup tents that were two shelter halves that just snapped together, no floor in it. And in the middle of the night, my son just started screaming. And it said it took him several minutes to get him calmed down enough to understand what his son was saying. And he said something stuck its hand underneath the tent, and he hit it with the flashlight. So it's like, well, I said, wow, he told me that story. He said he got up, looked around, he never saw anything, but he always kind of wondered about that. So this kind of helped set the scene. I go tell my friend this, and then I tell him the story of what happened when I was 15. I jokingly said, well, this is where old Harry lives, and it was kind of a joke, and we jabbered back and forth. And as the months went on, getting closer to vacation, every time we talk about it, I'd say, you'll see, that's where old Harry lives. So it come July, we got our vacation, and we go and we hike into these lakes, and beautiful sunny summer, July, and we get to the one main lake, and we get our packs off, and we're all kind of set our camp out a little bit, and he starts around the lake one way fishing, and I'm out going around the other way fishing, and there's this really loud thump. It's kind of in a big basin, and this very loud thump, kind of bang happens, and he looks at me, and I look at him, and I said, I told you. And we both kind of laugh. Both of us thinking, well, maybe some elk jumped, maybe, bear, who knows. Rock fell, whatever. And that happened a couple times during the day. And then we had dinner, got dark, and because it was kind of a pretty rough hike into this lake, we took the bare minimum of what we had to take. We had a sleeping bag, our fishing poles, and a little bit of cooking stuff, and that was about it. And it got dark, and all of us, we had laid down just out on the ground in sleeping bags to go to sleep, and all of a sudden there was a commotion. And the only thing I can compare it to is like a bluff charge from a bear. It was a very intense, rapid crash, 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 thump, and it stopped. And both of us, immediately are alerted to whatever this was, and then it's just quiet, nothing. So we decided we better get the fire going back again, and we get a fire going, and he had what was called like a hiker's lantern at the time. All it is a little metal case with some glass windows and a candle in it, and we lit that. And that was the only light we had, that in the fire, because we didn't take a flashlight with us, because at that time flashlights were heavier than they are these days. And so we settle back down. We don't hear anything. It's probably a half hours went by, nothing going on, and like, wow, that was weird. And then all of a sudden, from another direction, same thing, just a crash, thump, bang, thump. And we're all alerted again, sitting up, looking, and nothing. Quiet. Probably a half hour goes by, nothing. And the same thing, but a different direction. And as this basically kept up all night long. And several times during this, it was really heavy huckleberry brush under the timber. And you could hear like something being thrown through that brush. It's like if you throw a rock and it goes through brush, you can hear it hitting the brush and then thump when it hits the ground. We heard rocks thrown. And then that really kind of set me off because I kept thinking it was probably a bear. And at this point, then it's like, bear don't throw rocks. And like I said, it kept up during the night, and several times there would be what sounded like, like a 4 or 5 inch limb being snapped. You'd hear that kind of noise too. And basically, when it got daylight, we got the heck out of there. And that incident, it was kind of funny because we did not talk about it afterwards. We just kind of were real quiet about it with each other. But that incident bothered me something fierce. It just bothered me. I'd ran around the woods my whole life at that point, never really thinking about anything like this. I knew there were bear out there. I knew there were cougar. I knew there were a lot of things that may not be friendly if you ran into the wrong way, but this was a whole different thing. And it bothered me so bad. After probably 5-6 years, I decided I've got to do something about this. I have to try to figure this out so it will quit bothering me so much. And that's when I decided that I'm going to try to look into this Sasquatch thing, Bigfoot thing, because that was the only thing that fit with what happened to me as best I could tell. So I was kind of late in life to get into the internet or anything like that. And the first year, I had started kind of reading and looking into things a little bit. And the first time I ever got on the internet, the first thing I did a search on was Bigfoot. And I couldn't believe there were just thousands and thousands of different things online with Bigfoot. And it's like, wow, I'm not alone. The similar stories have happened to countless other people. And it snowballed from there. It's like, oh man, I'm not alone. I kind of felt vindicated, for lack of better words, because other people were experiencing the same thing, same different things, and reading other stories. And that's basically what started my interest in Sasquatch research. Okay, yeah, there was 4 different reports, upper drainage of the river drainage that I run around in for years, of these a couple of Sasquatch were kept being seen by people. The male one was quite a bit bigger than the female, and it was real dark, like black, but it kind of had like white or silver on its shoulders, kind of like almost like a silverback gorilla when they get older, kind of turning silver. And the female was considerably smaller, and she was kind of reddish colored. And they had been seen like 4 different reports I know in that same area up there, this upper river drainage, that I know one of the guys see him. It was kind of funny. I was up there actually the weekend after he had the sighting. It was the first I had heard of him, and I got a pretty good report of what he saw and exactly where he'd seen it. And then later I got different reports that sounded like the exact same 2 running as a pair, a male and a female. As time went on, I think all Sasquatch researchers go through certain kind of a progression of what they do and how they look at things. But for me, it's always been about getting out in the woods, because that's what I like to do. It's always sometimes I say it's like I'm just a guy that likes to go in the woods. The rest of this just kind of comes along with it. So I start looking into these things, but it's always wrapped around going hiking or exploring or something like that. There are times when it's been very specifically that we're looking for Sasquatch evidence or something. I've been involved with some other, some expeditions and some different television filming and some other things. But most everything that really interesting that ever happened seems like it's always when you're doing something else. You're not looking for a Sasquatch. The Sasquatch finds you type thing. Some of the interesting things that's happened over the years is I had been deer hunting in a location where I had to cross through kind of a trail through some timber into another network of logging roads. And I was coming back. It's getting dark. It's not quite dark yet. And interestingly enough, a silhouette owl is following me. And it just keeps giving a little whistle at me. And I can see it silhouetted occasionally. So I keep stopping to look back for this owl. And all of a sudden, from way distant to the east, I get what sounds very much like what is referred to as the Tahoe scream. Which, strangely enough, sounds kind of like a sonar ping to me. It's just a weird sound. And I kind of, funny because I stopped and I thought, man, that sounded just like the Tahoe scream. And so I waited for a while and I didn't hear anything else. And as I walked out, I got across the trail and I got back to my truck and get off my gear and I get in the truck and I'm starting to drive out. Well, the truck is on kind of a landing on top of a finger ridge, and the road drops down along the side of this finger ridge into a creek bottom and comes back up another finger ridge and then drops over that ridge and drops into another creek bottom and comes up to a timber line. And this is all a logged off that's probably about 6 or 7 years old. The reprod trees are, 5, 6 feet tall or so. And as my truck drops down to the first creek bottom and comes up the second finger ridge, as my headlights sweep over to the edge of the timber on the next ridge over, I see two very large, upright, dark figures that were headed in the same direction that Tahoe scream came from. And as my headlights sweep them, I slam on my brakes. And so they're a little past back behind the headlights. And they turn and they just take off at a really fast speed back the way they were coming from. And I'm quickly throw the rig in reverse and I'm trying to back up, trying to catch up to them with the headlights to see what I see, but they're gone before I get to that point. And I'm like, did I just see what I think I saw? Because it's like, I'm running it in my head. It's like, nah, they're two black upright figures. They weren't elk. They didn't have a body, a lighter body. They didn't have anything. But I just didn't. It was so quick that it's like, I think I saw two Sasquatch, but did I? There was some doubt in my mind. I drove down along the timber line and I tried to look with a flashlight, but I didn't see anything. It's pretty thick salal brush along where they were traveling. And I told myself, okay, I'm going to go back the next day. I'm going to see if I can find any footprints or anything. And the next day it was just pouring rain, and I looked and looked, but I couldn't find any tracks. I couldn't find any hair. I couldn't find anything. So it's like, to me, I think that's what I saw, but I couldn't tell you for sure. Now I go back to the same area all during deer season. I kept seeing a small herd of elk on this one ridge, and there was a really nice big bull elk in that herd. And I generally didn't elk hunt that much because I hunt basically by myself, and that's where it was, being a walk-in area. It'd be pretty strenuous to try to get an elk out by myself. But I kept seeing this big bull elk, so I decided that year I was going to hunt elk. But I couldn't go hunting for opening day. I was working, so I went back out there after work. I still had an hour or so daylight. So I thought I'll just run in there and see if those elk are there. And I get there and I go up that ridge where I'd been seeing the elk every day, and sure enough, there was his gut pile from somebody else got him. And it's like, oh, shoot. Well, so I get back down to the road, and I'm kind of walking back out this one road a little that's below that in the timber along, and I hear what sounds like two rocks being clacked together up on the ridge above me. Well, this is just adjacent to where this gut pile was. And I'm like, what the heck, is that? So I sat and I listened, and I sat and I listened, and nothing. And then after a while, I decided I was going to clack some rocks together. And I clacked the rocks together, and I hear something take off in the timber, but I couldn't see it. By this time, it's getting really dark, so I decided probably I better get out of there, and I left. The next year, I'm in the same spot, basically, and my rig is parked on this landing, same landing as the first incident. And I was coming back, I went out and I was coming back these finger ridges, or this finger ridge, and a fellow I was hunting with was on the next ridge over, and we were just kind of heading back to the truck. We'd been out hunting, gonna have lunch, and from where the truck was, it's probably another several hundred yards to the timber line behind that. And we're just kind of paralleling each other, and all of a sudden out of that timber comes, for the only thing I can describe it as a roar, because I can't really describe it any other way than it sounded like an extremely loud, powerful roar. It lasted about 5 seconds. It stopped. There was a gap of probably about 5 seconds, and then it did it again for about 3 seconds, a gap again of about 5 seconds, and another about 3 seconds of this roar. And from where we were to that timber line was probably 600 to 700 yards. And in my mind, to create that much volume and power to it, you would need like a professional concert sound system or something. I mean, it was just amazingly powerful. And my buddy, he looks at me, and I kind of look at him, and he's like, what in the hell was that? And in my mind, I already knew what I thought it was, but I wasn't saying anything at the time. So we got back to the rig, and he made the comment and said, maybe we don't want to know what that was. I said, yeah, that was weird. And so the next day there, went back, and I was poking around that timber, and on the back edge of this patch of bigger timber where the sound had come out of, there was it's an old railroad grade. It was grown over, but it was an old railroad grade. And there was one spot in there was kind of a puddle, and it was kind of soft. And there's one good look or pretty good track full of water, and then what looked like what I call a half track, a front half of a foot ahead of that. And that was the only part of it that was really soft enough to take a track. And I went home and I got casting material, and I come back and I with a turkey baster to suck the water out of the track, but it was just kind of mudded in from the water and taken most of the detail out of it. So but I never cast it. There was a fellow kind of living, so I put some cameras out there and some other things in that area. Never had any luck with them, but there was kind of a Vietnam veteran guy that was kind of living out that way a little later in a camp trailer for a little while. And I was going in one time to check a camera, and he was camping there. And I talked to him. When I was walking by, he asked if I could jump start his rig, and I said, can I come back to do it? And he's sure. So when I'm talking to him, I kind of interestingly asked him, because he'd been there about a week. And he says, I said, if you hear anything strange out here or anything? And he made the comment of, yeah, I've heard some really weird screams at night. He says, I kind of just thought that maybe you're a cougar or something, but they just kind of sound weird. And well, that's interesting. Another time, my lady and I were down by St. Helens, south of St. Helens. The intent was to go to Skookum Meadows for the weekend kind of thing, and we kind of got a late start, and so we were just kind of looking for a place to camp for the night. And we were just kind of southwest of the Swift Reservoir in the Lewis River when we went out this kind of logging road, and we're kind of driving along, and there were these little dirt spur tracks that went off the road kind of towards the Lewis River. And we were kind of looking for just someplace to spend the night. And this one looked a little wider, and so we start driving down it, and here comes a really old Chevy pickup 4x4, all rusted out, really in rough looking shape, coming at us. And this little grade was just wide enough for the truck, just barely. Anyway, and luckily right there was kind of a pullover, and I pulled off, and this guy pulls up. He was like the quintessential old prospector miner from like the old movies, kind of had a funny hat on, big white beard, and plaid shirt. And he's like, oh, what are you kids out doing? You out camping or something? And yeah, that's what he said. And he's like, oh. And so I asked him, how far does the road go? And he made the comment that, it goes down to the river there, and where we were all like pine trees, mainly pine trees, and it was part of an old lava flow off the mountain. They weren't real tall. They were probably 15, 20 feet tall. And over towards the river, there was a line of conifer trees. He said, well, the road there drops down to the river. It gets pretty rough. Okay. And then he made this very specific comment. He says, or asked, he goes, you kids have a camera? I'm like, yeah, I got a camera. And he said, well, I was here last weekend, and this young guy, he come run up to me and asking me if I had a camera. And I said, no, I didn't have a camera. And he said, yeah. He says, there was a family of Bigfoot down by the river, across the river, eating something. And he said, I went down there. I said, sure as heck, there they were. He said, but I didn't have a camera. So this old guy drives off, and I look at Alicia, and she looks at me, and it's like, okay, we're spending the night here. So there was a little pull off there, and we were just sleeping in the back of the truck in the canopy, just for the night. And we kind of get set up and we're sleeping at night. And we hear some kind of a few noises at night, but nothing really anything that exciting. And get up the next morning and there's this stick figure, for lack of better words. If you took a bough, just a twig, that, like a stick man almost, about yay tall, on the windshield of my truck. Almost like if like a cop will put a ticket under your windshield wiper, but it was this stick figure like thing. And I looked at Lisa and was like, did you put that there? No, I put that there. I hadn't. And we're kind of looking around, and that's kind of when it dawns on me. I'm looking at this stick figure and I realize that's a deciduous branch, not a conifer. And all the trees around us are conifers. The nearest deciduous are over by the river, and it's probably a good 75, 100 yards away from us. And it's like, we look at each other and it's like, what the heck? You know, things like that happen over the years, little odd things. You take them individually, they're just weird, but if it keeps things like that keep happening over time, you got to start kind of questioning what's going on. Those are the kind of things that just make you go kind of shake your head. It's like, what do you do with that? So it just broadens the mystery in my book. You know, somebody I've heard that said, you know, oh, well, oh, a deer. A deer's not smart. That's just a dumb deer or whatever. Or that's a dumb raccoon. Or something. It's like, I kind of like to say, just because something thinks different than we do doesn't necessarily make it dumb. And I think we're dealing with something that's, a lot more intelligent than we give it credit for. And I think we were dealing with something that, in many ways, in the natural world, is way ahead of us. I think they're way more in tune than we are when it comes to their environment. We have a lot of catching up to do them. At least personally, I know I do. Like I say, for me, the things that I encounter for the most part seem very subtle. But I can give a kind of a phony example, a little example at home when I think that I've had activity, but it's subtle. A cougar had killed the spiked deer and stashed it under this alder. And I didn't find it till it was pretty well eaten. I put a game camera on it and I got some video of the cougar. But he only came back twice, and he was not happy that I had found his kill, because then he moved it a couple times. So later, I took the two jawbones and I set them up on top of this log, not thinking anything about it, really. He had chewed up most of the skull. And these jawbones were on this log for a year at least. Nothing moved, nothing changed, and all of a sudden I noticed one of them had moved a little bit. And frankly, I didn't think anything about it. A raccoon had went down the log, raven had messed with it. I didn't think anything of it. And I walk by this basically every day. And I come by it and I realize it's moved again, a little different. So I start just pull up my cell phone, take a photo of it. And I realize every day something moves. Jawbone moves one way, gets turned over. This goes on for a week. I put a rock up there, done. Nothing moved again. Still sitting that way several years later. It's like, is that Sasquatch? I don't know. Nobody else is down there. It struck me very weird. I go doing this loop trail. There's one stretch of the trail where we get strange formations, for lack of better words. Some people call them glyphs, whatever. We would get triangle patterns. And now sticks fall off trees, all kinds of weird things all the time. You get storm damage, you get all kinds of things. But this one stretch of tail is where we usually get these, and all of a sudden, like one year, it's always triangles, always triangles, always triangles. Next year, it's H's, H's, H's. Back when it was triangles, I go down by the mouth of the creek, and there's a Y in a branch with another branch laid across it, and an agate sitting in the middle of it. Wasn't there the day before. None of it was there the day before. Well, that's interesting. Alicia says they know you like rocks. They see you looking at rocks and picking up rocks. So they left that for you. I don't know. Another spot on the trail, a Y in a branch, but it was a pretty good size alder branch, but with another stick laying across it, formed the triangle, and it's got one of the old blue bromo seltzer bottles, cobalt blue, laying in the middle of it. Where did that come from? That wasn't here yesterday. None of it was there yesterday. She says they know you like old bottles. I used to do a lot of bottle digging. It's like, how would they know that? Well, they watch you. They see you doing this. I don't know. It's like weird things like that. It's like, can I say that's a Sasquatch? No, I didn't see what did it.
But you do live in prime habitat.
But yeah, but I live in a good spot where I've had other things happen. The property I live on, my dad's old hunting partner, he lived there for a while with a lady that was a friend of his. They kind of became common law and lived there. And that's how I got the property. They were going to move, and they offered it to me. She had lived there for quite a few years before he moved in, and she told me the story that when she had a previous husband who passed away. When they bought that property, there was a single-wide mobile home on the property at the time, and the people that owned it, they were selling the property because they said they would not live there anymore because the Sasquatch was looking in their window, kept looking in their windows at night, and the wife was done. She wasn't going to live there anymore. So yeah, there's some history. I'm on the river, and there's a creek that comes into the property. Along that creek, just up the road, across the road, there's a home that has a very tall chain link fence, an 8-foot chain link fence around it. And that's because the people that lived there, they had some very aggressive German Shepherds, 3 of them. And I got to know them a little bit, and we would walk a lot. They recounted this story of this is kind of before they knew I was involved with Sasquatch stuff. That one night, the dogs were just going crazy. And the husband, he opened his bedroom window, which kind of looked out onto their front porch, and looked to the front of the property where the gate was, and it was dark, but he could see that there was something standing outside the gate. What he thought was somebody standing outside the gate, this dark shape. And he said, "What's going on out here?" And he said it answered him back, but it wasn't human, is the way he described it. And I said, "Well, what do you mean wasn't human?" And he said, "Well, it was kind of this growling, weird voice." And he said, "That's when I noticed that Rommel, their big male, who was very aggressive, was on the porch, scared, up against the door, and the other 2 dogs had went into the house." And that's when he's like, "Oh, crap," and he slammed the window shut. He was telling me, "I don't know what that was." And he said, and his wife said then had been hearing strange sounds behind the house in the woods. And I thought, what sounds? And the only way she could describe them, and to this day I still haven't quite figured out what it is, to compare it to, because she said, well, it sounded like a satanic whippoorwill. What does a satanic whippoorwill sound like? So yeah, and I've heard other reports in the area.
Is there any time of year that's more active than others? Fall.
October. If you look at cultures around the world forever, the fall of the year, you had different activities because you're getting ready for harvest time. Yeah, the light levels are changing, and now that might have a lot to do with it too, because they seem to be a lot more active in low light hours. So, it's getting the darker time of the year. So their activity time, if that is the case, has just increased. So that might have a lot to do with it too. I don't know. Mm-hmm. It's all conjecture. There was another one that I got two different reports of that was kind of caramel colored or light tan that I thought was kind of unique, because I don't hear too many reports of like that color. So it was kind of interesting.
One question that we get asked the most on our channel is, how come we don't put trail cameras up to catch the Sasquatch? I tried for years to do this. I thoroughly documented this. I tried placing cameras everywhere, and not just trail cameras, but all kinds of cameras. We had tiny little Wi-Fi cameras that were about this large that I tried putting up and down the ridge that ran on Wi-Fi. They were motion detected. I also tried putting thermal cameras that were over 15 feet up high in a tree that overlooked an entire valley. We also tried trail cameras. We tried multiple types of cameras. And I can tell you with certainty that these creatures know where these cameras are. Do I pretend to know how they know? No, I don't. It could be multiple reasons. It could be smell, sight, feel, hear, whatever it is that these electronics are putting off. The Sasquatch always know. And every time I would remove a camera, they would make it clear that they were using this path again. We have had 2 comments on our channel from 2 different people from different parts of the state that have said in our comment section that they use trail cameras to repel them. One of the comments described the Sasquatch as pests where they live. So they use the trail cameras. It's the only thing that keeps them away is cameras. So whatever the reason is, it's pretty safe to say now, look, there's camera projects all over the country. We know of some really good camera projects, but the Sasquatch are evading them. They're evading these cameras, all sorts of cameras. So here's John Pickering on his theory as to why trail cameras don't work.
Well, I'm very interested in anything with electromagnetic energy, because basically the world is full of it. Everything has a certain electromagnetic signature. Our nervous systems work on electricity, and I think that the natural world especially is way more controlled by that in some ways than we like to think about or have really dove into. Fortunately, when it comes to Sasquatch stuff, you start talking about electromagnetic, everybody is, it's the woo. You don't talk about that. And to me, it's like, why would you not talk about that? Because it is part of our natural world. And everything, I think, is affected to it. It affects them way more than we think. I mean, if you're walking down the street and all of a sudden, ooh, I feel like I'm being looked at. Your hair stands up on your back. Why? Well, that's your body's reaction to something, but what is it reacting to? I think as humans, we're very sensitive to it. We just don't know it. Because our modern world, we go home and we have our electric lights, we have all our electric appliances, we have power lines running around outside the houses, which put out lots of electromagnetic interference. I think it's become white noise to us. If you look at what we consider ancient civilizations, and I can go like to Stonehenge somewhat as an example, like the blue stones, they now have a lot of quartz in them, which give them a lot of electromagnetic signature. They moved them 50, 60 miles to that site. Well, why would you just not pick the stones that you could get closer? Those stones meant something. There was a reason for that. I think our ancestors were more in tune with electromagnetic energies of the earth and everything else around us than we are today, because they weren't bombarded by it, all this artificial electricity that our modern society has held. So it stands to reason to me that a Sasquatch in the woods will still have those senses that our early ancestors probably had. Now, an example kind of that is that it's recognized, and it's not considered science fiction or woo at all, that quite a few birds, pigeons, other birds, and some other animals see the electromagnetic pole, basically, energies of the earth. That's how they navigate over long distance. They've recognized this, it's accepted. At first it wasn't, but it's accepted now, and the more they've studied and looked, they realize that more and more animals, as they look at them, have this ability. Now, it's been determined that it's a substance called cryptochrome in their eyes that is sensitive to electromagnetism, that allows them to see these energies. And human eyes have two types of cryptochrome in them, one of which is super sensitive to electromagnetic energy. And it's kind of a double-edged sword. It's why aren't we seeing it is almost a bigger question than can we see it? Because we have that, it's in our system to be able to see this, but I think it's become white noise. I think for the most part, most people don't really see it because we're so bombarded by it that it's almost like a background noise that their brain is tuning out. For me, I really think that is something that we should really be considering when it comes to Sasquatch research, that these beings probably can see into the electromagnetic spectrum much better than we can, which gives them several advantages, especially when it comes to our electronics, of being able to keep track of us. I think game cameras are a good example of that. I think if you're
All cameras,
everything now has batteries in it, energy in it of some sort. Everything that doesn't. So I think that is an advantage that I think we'd be smart to consider. Whether it is the case or not, I think it's kind of not very smart to ignore the possibility.